President Trump's global tariffs are being put to the test with oral arguments about to get underway before the U.S. Supreme Court. And welcome to a brand new hour of America's Newsroom. I'm Dana Perino. It's a busy day.
Yes, it is. How you feeling? You good?
Oh, great.
Strong.
That was easy.
I'm Bill Hemmer. Good morning. The court deciding whether or not President Trump has the legal authority to impose sweeping tariffs by declaring a national economic emergency. Now, the AG Pam Bondi says it's an argument they are confident they will win with the Supremes.
The president has the authority to do this under his executive authority. John Sauer is my Solicitor General. He is more than prepared. We feel very confident. And this is the most important case in front of the Supreme Court. Not only is this about national security, but also our economic security around the world.
David Spunt is live at the Supreme Court as this big decision is about to be, at least the beginnings of the decision are about to be heard. David.
That's exactly right, Dana and Bill. We're just a month into this Supreme Court term, and this case may be the most consequential of the term. In fact, President Trump on social media yesterday called this case a life or death case for the United States of America. So the stakes are incredibly high, and there's also a time sensitivity issue to kind of rush this decision through. So we may get something before the end of June. In fact, in the next month or so from the justices because of these sweeping tariffs that have been imposed. Now, we have a group I can hear right now outside the Supreme Court. I don't know if we have a live shot of them, but there's probably about 150 people that have been walking down the sidewalk protesting some of the action outside the Supreme Court. You can see right now that live look of them walking near the Supreme Court. It has been closed, most of it, for security reasons, but we did expect to have a protest today. Now, the justices this morning, guys, will hear arguments over lawsuits from several small businesses and several Democratic-led states who say President Trump's use of the so-called national emergency to put tariffs on foreign nations is unconstitutional. At issue before the court, whether the International Emergency Economic Powers Act gives Trump that power. Now, while lower courts have ruled against the tariffs, the DOJ argues that if those tariffs are declared unconstitutional and removed, then the United States could be in a tough position without any type of defense if other nations put heavy tariffs on the U.S. Now, President Trump toyed with the idea of coming in person to attend oral arguments, but ultimately decided against it. He'll be heading down to make an economic announcement in Miami today. But again, these oral arguments kicking off here any moment, and we do expect a decision from the justices fairly soon, as this is considered not only a high profile, but a time-sensitive case. Dana, Bill.
Thank you so much. And some curious protesters there, David. Thank you. More on this. John Yoo is a former Deputy Assistant Attorney General and was a law clerk for Justice Thomas. So when you are thinking about the justices today, what are they listening for? Like, what's the key word that will help them make a decision?
Dana, that's a great way to put it. What is the word that you're going to hear over and over again? And that's going to be emergency. Mm-hmm. Is this a national emergency? President Trump has vast powers in the international economic realm, including, I think, the power to impose tariffs. In fact, the power just to block and embargo all trade with any country. The real question is, does the country face what the statute here calls an unusual and extraordinary threat that allows him to access those powers? I think that if President Trump were to say China or Mexico pose that kind of threat because of fentanyl, or because they're flooding our markets with cheap goods, he would win 9-0. The question is, can a trade deficit that has been around for 50 years and gone up and down, large, small, can that be a national emergency, which would then trigger the president's powers under the statute, which the powers given to him, by the way, by Congress? He's not claiming he's doing it by himself under the Constitution. He's saying Congress gave me the power to impose these tariffs, but only if there's a national emergency.
So, John, they'll argue that you will leave our economy virtually defenseless if you rule against us. And conversely, Scott Bessent was saying that we've got other avenues to go at this if we lose. We've got other means to make sure the tariffs stay in place, at least some of them, or even most of them, John.
It's a great point, too, Bill. There's I don't think there's really any dispute that this is, as President Trump put it, maybe the most important case of the Supreme Court term, could be one of the most important cases on the scope of presidential power in a long time. But if you were the Trump administration, what you should be doing is what you're calling Plan B there, Bill. What are you going to do if the court says a trade deficit as a whole that hasn't really changed much in 20 years since the Bush years? Actually, it's about the same size. If that's not going to be a national emergency, what can the country do next? Well, I think Secretary Spunt is right. You can do targeted tariffs, targeted sanctions. For example, you could cut off all trade with Mexico. You could cut trade to Mexico with 50%, or you could just target specific industries in Mexico. Same with China. If there really is an extraordinary and unusual threat to the national security of the United States, it's not coming from Europe. It's not coming from Japan or Korea. It's coming from China. The United States could use other trade laws that would target China specifically for the kind of international economic threat it poses to the country.
John, we have about a minute left, and I just want to ask you about one other thing. There's a president invited the Senate Republicans up today to have a conversation. Of course, we're in the day 36 of the government shutdown, but one of the things he's pressuring them on is to break the filibuster in the Senate. This is something that's been a long time part of our Constitution. He thinks it's obstructive for him in order to get things done. There is resistance. I want to get your take on this and how it might feed into some of the legislative accomplishments the president would like to get done before his term is up.
Let me take my hat off as a former Supreme Court clerk and put my other one on, where I was general counsel of the Senate Judiciary Committee. I have no doubt if the Democrats get back in power and control the White House and the Senate, they will get rid of they will want to get rid of the filibuster. It will require Democrats to stop them, and they will want to pack the Supreme Court. And I think one thing that President Trump should think about is, yes, the short-term win on the budget and other things he wants could be done without the filibuster, but think about the future. Think about Democrats taking power sometime, and they all said, all their nominees for president, other than Biden in the last election, said they would pack the Supreme Court. They would get rid of the filibuster. I take them at their word.
John Yoo, thank you so much.
Thank
Beautiful
you, sir.
Backdrop there.
Good deal. Thank you, John.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.